You know, every year there's one speaking engagement I look forward to more than any other. And every year it's the same one. It's getting together with my friends in Free Press to talk about media reform. The last time we did this was last June in Minneapolis. And I talked then about how the winds of change were blowing across America and we're about to usher in a period of much-needed reform. I can finally admit it now, I wasn't 100% sure back then when I said that. As anyone who has lived through the past few elections know, it ain't over till it's over, and sometimes not even then. But the good news and the happy news and the historic news, I think, is that change has come to America. Change has come to Washington, D.C. Reform breezes are blowing through the corridors of power all over the city. And if things go well, we may be launched on an era of reform to match what the progressives and the New Dealers of the last century contributed to us. What a shining, golden, beckoning opportunity that is. But it is no sure thing that it will end so well. Reform is never on autopilot, and in spite of all the wonders and marvels of 21st century technology, there is no GPS system that can deliver us to a new progressive promised land. My friend, the late Arthur Schlesinger Jr., believed that periods of reaction in America are succeeded with a lot of blood and sweat and toil and tears by waves of reform. But it's impossible to predict how long the current window of reform will remain open. I don't think we'll be circling the wagons anytime soon. But if we're not quick about it and smart about it and thorough about it, the winds of change could blow themselves out long before our job is done. We must seize the opportunity when we have it. Us. Now. Change is different this time because it's riding on a wave of technology transformation, the likes of which we've never seen. Change isn't limited to just politics. Technology change is reshaping every aspect of our lives, how we live, work, play, care for ourselves, entertain ourselves, govern ourselves. All of this is in flux. The only questions are how quickly will change come in all these areas and how change in one will affect the others. What will the world look like when the dust settles? In communications, will old media stalwarts like newspapers and broadcasting simply disappear, or will they adapt and survive? How about journalism? Will anyone figure out a business model to support in-depth investigative journalism? Or must we develop something completely new, perhaps based on philanthropy or nonprofit models or public media? What about the core values of localism and diversity and competition that Free Press continues to fight for so valiantly? Do they still hold sway in a world where connecting with someone in Germany is as easy as connecting with someone in suburban Germantown? Or when you can find any opinion under the sun simply by typing in any opinion under the sun in Google, and you'll get 153 million hits, by the way. We tried it. Important questions all. But if we focus too much on the questions, it can leave us paralyzed. Just ask Prince Hamlet. We need to act thoughtfully, yes, but we need to act. And I mean act while the tide runs in our direction. Shakespeare again, wasn't it he that said something about taking the tide at its flood or else being bound in shallows and in misery? When it comes to public policy, 8 years of shallows and misery was enough for me. And I don't want to even think about any more such years. Good ideas are running on the present tide. Good people are stepping up on good causes. I don't want to start naming names because I'll inevitably leave somebody out. But if you haven't already, do yourself a favor and watch Senator Kerry's hearing last week on the future of journalism to get a sense of some of the creative ideas out there. Or pick up a copy of Free Press's new book, Changing Media, Public Interest Policies for the Digital Age. I've already read mine, underlined it, and dog-eared it. You should too. You don't have to agree with everything in there. Probably no one will, nor would its authors expect 100% agreement. But I commend it not just to the Free Press faithful, but to those who may be diametrically opposed to the recommendations the book makes. Changing Media is an important contribution to our national dialogue. It tees up issues we all need to be talking about, and it is particularly relevant now as the FCC sets out to develop a congressionally mandated broadband plan for the United States of America. In the few minutes we have together this morning, I'd like to focus on a little different aspect of the puzzle. What are the organizing principles that should be our touchstone as we sift through the myriad ideas out there and try to create a media that is truly of, by, and for the American people? Here's my current short list. Principle number one, it's all about democracy. Paraphrase James Carville if you like, it's the democracy, stupid. A democracy runs on information. Information is how we make intelligent decisions about our future and how we hold the powerful accountable. Deprive citizens of relevant and accurate and timely information, and you deprive them, really, of the ability to govern themselves. Indeed, if you look at the three core values of our media policy from time immemorial, localism and diversity and competition, they're all aimed at a single goal: to ensure that the American people have access to a wide range of information on issues of public concern. We are in trouble on this score. 2 decades of mindless deregulation, only briefly interrupted, topped off by a veritable tsunami of consolidation, not just across communications industries, but most industries, have succeeded in bringing our economy low and endangering the essential civic dialogue upon which democracy depends. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. We are skating perilously close to depriving our fellow citizens of the depth and breadth of information they need in order to make intelligent decisions about the future of their country. Newsrooms decimated, beat reporters laid off, newspapers literally shrinking before our eyes, infotainment, sensationalism, cable news mud wrestling, homogenized playlists. You all know the bill of particulars. The list goes on. We're not only losing journalists, we may be losing journalism. Some blame the internet and bloggers, and that's maybe a part of the story, but the problem started way before that. All that consolidation and mindless deregulation, rather than reviving the news business, condemned us to less real news, less serious political coverage, less investigative reporting, less diversity of opinion, less minority and female ownership, and fewer jobs for journalists. Hyper-commercialism and high-quality news make very uneasy bedfellows. My hero FDR said it very well, excuse me, in a letter to Joseph Pulitzer. He wrote, "I have always been firmly persuaded that our newspapers cannot be edited in the interests of the general public from the counting room," end quote. Broadcast journalism is no different. Readers and viewers and listeners are citizens to be informed and entertained, not products to be sold to advertisers. This is not to say that good journalism is incompatible with making a profit, but when TV and radio stations are no longer required to serve their local communities, when stations or newspapers are loaded down with crushing debt or owned by huge corporations preoccupied with cutting costs through supposed economies of scale, it should come as no surprise that some very precious things get lost. There are those who argue that's all over now. Consolidation and conglomeration are yesterday's news. I do not buy that. I believe that as soon as this economy of ours begins to turn around, we'll start seeing another urge to merge, to buy, to leverage, to find those ever elusive economies of scale. And that'll mean more newsrooms closed, more journalists fired, more private equity, less public dialogue. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, because many broadcasters and publishers still have the flame of the public interest burning brightly in their breasts. And I know that. I meet them all the time. But the unforgiving expectations of Wall Street and next quarter's earnings reports have made life more and more difficult, almost impossible for many of them, and pulled them in directions that many of them did not and do not want to go. Whatever we do should help those stations that are trying to do the right thing and nurture the democratic dialogue. And let me be clear here, when I say democratic dialogue, I'm not using that as some code word for the fairness doctrine. The fairness doctrine is long gone. It's not coming back, as much as some conspiracy theorists see it lurking behind every corner. You know, a couple of weeks ago, when we finally got the FCC on track to start doing something about the totally shameful state of minority and female ownership of media properties in this country, some had the gall to suggest that it was just a ruse to bring the fairness doctrine back. Resurrecting the straw man of a bygone fairness doctrine to deflect this country's very belated passage to equal opportunity is a kind of issue-mongering that has no place in 21st century America. We will not lose this opportunity to make real and lasting progress on diversity in media and media reform because some find it in their self-interest to keep this phony issue alive. That brings me to principle number 2. Old media is not dead. Judging by some of the stories out there, you'd think that just about everyone sits down at night to watch their favorite shows on Hulu, and that TV news and local newspapers have gone the way of the buggy whip. The fact is that most consumers still get their news and information from their local newspapers and from their broadcast stations. The internet, for all its many glories, doesn't yet fully compete with them in such areas as investigative journalism or in-depth local reporting, and may not anytime soon. Traditional media remain critically important, and it is something we need to deal with. I'm not saying that old media won't fade away, but we're not there yet. And sometimes change takes longer to arrive than we think it does. We've been out helping consumers all over this country of ours with the DTV transition, and you'd be amazed at how many people are still happily watching TV on their 30-year-old TV sets and their 20-year-old VCRs. So if old media is going to be with us a while yet, what implications does this have for us? It means we still need to get serious about defining broadcasters' public interest obligations and reinvigorating our license renewal process. Since we still need broadcasters to contribute to the democratic dialogue, we need clear standards that can be fairly but vigorously enforced. It is time to say goodbye to postcard renewal every 8 years and hello to license renewal every 3 years with some public interest guidelines. Now, I understand that many thoughtful people are ready to give up on the public interest. They would rather just impose a spectrum fee on broadcasters and be done with it. I am not ready to throw in the towel yet. The public interest standard just kind of strikes me like a grand old theater that has been badly neglected over the years. The structure is sound, and with a little imagination and a lot of hard work, we can make it a showplace once again. Principle number 3 is to make sure that the sins visited upon old media are not permitted to deny the promise of new media. You know me as someone who has supported and pushed the cause of internet freedom or internet openness or network neutrality, whatever you want to call it, for a long, long time. While the tide runs, we need to assure this, And for openers, I will be working for a fifth principle of non-discrimination to be one of the first fruits of our reconstituted Federal Communications Commission. But looking farther ahead, as broadcast and other content migrates online, how do we promote the goals that we as a society really care about? How do we nourish that dynamic and essential civic dialogue? How do we get information out about real issues of public concern? How do we educate? How do we protect our kids? Historically, government regulation has been based on some sort of licensing relationship or statutory directive. But how does that apply to the online world, where websites are not only not licensed, but they may not even be in the United States? And what if the new media fail to provide the things we care about, the things we need? How do we advance those interests in ways that are effective and respectful of constitutional and jurisdictional boundaries? How do we accomplish our goals as a free society while making sure we don't impinge the potential of these open and dynamic technologies? I wish I had an answer to those questions. I don't. But I do know we need to begin a serious national dialogue. And that's why I welcome Changing Media's call for a top-level commission charged to tackle big issues like this. How sweet it would be to have that kind of dialogue, rather than yet another mindless go-round and that tired old debate about regulation versus deregulation that's so poisoned our ability to come together and reason together for so many of our recent years. Certainly we need more regulation than the country has had these past several years, but regulation isn't always the answer. We'll need ways to address market failures in different ways. For example, should we find a way adequately to fund PBS or some other group that is actually interested in doing the job, maybe PBSS, a public broadcasting system on steroids. That can't be done on the cheap. We'll hear lots of laments that there's not a lot of extra cash floating around in this troubled economy. But as Craig pointed out, other nations find ways to support such things. And the point is, we need to start talking, discussing, and planning right now. Principle number 4, remember how we got here? A lot of organizing, a lot of grassroots work everywhere, town hall meetings, media reform, teach-ins, marches. Don't anyone think we won, it's over, now we're just coming to Washington to harvest the field. Change has come to Washington, but Washington has not been conquered. The tools that got us this far, got you and I this far, are still, I am convinced, the tools to turn promise into reality. At the end of the day, recognizing the hurdles we face, I am nevertheless an optimist. Lessons are being learned, old dogmas are dying, opportunity is all around us. Even, I believe, at the FCC. Finally, the FCC can actually become an agent for positive change. And what a change that is. I believe that the national broadband strategy that the Commission is tasked to develop by next February is the most important charge we have been given, certainly since the '96 Act, and perhaps the most important challenge we have ever been given. And I can't say exactly where it'll lead, but I'm optimistic it will be a strategy that unleashes the power of truly transformative technology to change the lives of each and every citizen across this land of ours, no matter who they are, no matter where they live, no matter what the circumstances of their individual lives may be. Every citizen has a right to expect that, and it's our job to make it happen. Building a communications environment that truly reflects and truly nourishes diversity and democracy is, I think, one of our nation's greatest callings, because without that, all the other issues we confront, and goodness knows they are legion, don't receive the scrutiny they need. So let's get on with the agenda. This is about the people's business, about citizens working together to strengthen our democracy. Isn't that how we built this country in the first place? It wasn't just one sunny July morning we declared our independence in one glorious document. It was that we made a declaration of interdependence, one upon the other, to win and sustain our freedom and to build a better place. Every generation faces the challenge, and today, strengthening democracy means building media democracy. The media agenda is at the center of democracy's agenda. If we work at it, really work at it, you and I can realize the dream. Us now. Thank you for listening, and thank you for everything you do for America.